Ladies and gentlemen, our guest today is John Furman, a man with a diverse range of talents and interests. With a strong background in math and science, John holds a master's degree in data science, but that's just the beginning of his story. John is also the founder and owner of the Duck Hole Company, a business which specializes in selling seed and developing plans for waterfowl habitat management. He is also an avid hunter with a wealth of knowledge and experience to share about the sport. So whether you're a waterfowl enthusiast, a waterfowling aficionado, or simply somebody who's curious about the world of waterfowl and waterfowl hunting, you're in for a treat. Please join me in welcoming John Furman to the Fowl Minds podcast.
We've got a duck club, John, in Mississippi, where we do a lot of moist soil stuff. And this past year, I saw your Golden Millet, and we actually bought quite a bit of it and planted it alongside some other stuff. See how it would do, and it did really good. The ducks really favored it in quite a few places. So that's why we reached out to you. You know, like I said, I've been following you for a while, and I wanted to talk to you about some stuff and pick your brain on it. And yeah, we're glad you're here.
Absolutely. Well, I appreciate it. Appreciate the invite. And did it hold up pretty good for you for the most of the year, the Golden Millet, or?
It did good. You know what we did this year was we tried, you know, it was kind of a trial. There's a lot of ducks in the area where we're at. It's going to sound weird, but there's thousands and thousands and thousands of spoonies in the part of the Delta we're at. So I was afraid that if we pumped up everything all at once, they would just come in there and mow it all down. So what we did was we had some water early season, and then we had more water mid-season, and then January, you know, we had water everywhere. So we pumped our water up in stages, and we flooded. We did the same thing with the millet. So by the end of the season, we had fresh food. We still had fresh food, you know, and it did really good. It held up good. The ducks used it real well. I found this year that like we had some corn planted and some milo planted. We left a lot of beans in the field. It seemed like the ducks used the milo and the corn and the beans more for cover, like thermal cover, and they roosted in the beans quite a bit, rather than they fed in there. I don't know, maybe it was just the year we had or what. We kind of learned that you know, for us where we're at, the corn was good, but we could put our efforts more towards, you know, we can plant a lot more millet for the price of a little bit of corn, you know.
Oh, absolutely. I think like 10% of the cost of corn.
Yeah,
At least where we are.
And well, I'm fortunate because the guys that are on the club and in on the club, they're all farmers, so they have the resources to do, you know, to farm for ducks. It just turns into a cost thing, you know. So this year, I think that's what we're going to do. We're just going to plant a lot of millet and pump up. You know, we have a lot of rice too. We're just going to pump a lot of water. You know, found that this year just having water and waiting to the end of the season to pump certain spots with fresh food was kind of the key, you know.
Sounds like a really large club compared to what I deal with. So
yeah,
got a lot of options.
We do. We have 3 big farms and then a bunch of little places all in between those, you know. But we also did some moist soil, tried to do some moist soil stuff this year, and it worked really good. We had a lot of Smartweed and foxtail and barnyard grass, and we had some coffee weed, you know, Cisbania, you know. We left some of that stuff for cover. And you know, you're a soil guy. I wanted to talk to you about, you know, the benefits of moist soil. And I know a lot of guys, I listen to a lot of other podcasts, and they talk a lot about moist soil. And there's a lot of guys in Missouri and Tennessee and Arkansas that are swear by it, you know, and just want to get your opinion on that and see what you thought about that.
All right. Well, we can start wherever you want to. I mean, that's a lot of topics, and we could probably have 10 different podcasts for each one. So um, I can start with the moist soil. So where I hunt, it's not a really large club, and basically in North Carolina, like specifically like Hyde County, Pamlico County, those areas, there are a pile of impoundments. Specifically Hyde County, you got Lake Mattamuskeet, kind of sits right in the middle, and then I think there's upwards of 2,000 impoundments all around it. And basically, I'm sitting on a little 10-acre pond. There might be a neighbor that has 150 acres beside me, or 1,000 acres over here, and I really wanted to exploit basically limited resources. Like if I have all corn in 10 acres, and then you got a 100-acre cornfield over here, right? What's the benefit between that 100 acres of corn and my 10 acres of corn? So we started reducing the corn over the last 5 years and added millets and moist soil. Now, I will say I love moist soil. I've done it now for 2 years, and I mix my millets in there with it. However, I'm not getting the huge response that I want when it comes to duck utilization, because I think it's just the size of the area that I'm doing versus if I look at some of the other farms that were, trying to do moist soil, they had, a larger area, so they had a major impact, and the ducks really liked it. But when you're trying to work with, a 10-acre pond, I got 3 acres in corn, a bunch of millets, and then I've got, let's say 3 or 4 acres of moist soil. It's I didn't see enough impact that said, hey, I want to keep on keeping on. So
Yeah.
this year we're going to let the moist soil grow where our willows are and try to aim for smartweed mainly. Um, and then we're going to go back to basically doing a lot more millets where the moist soil unit was.
I'm interested. I'm glad you brought up Smartweed, because that was one of my questions that when I went to the Refuge. So if I could just back up a little bit. So
Oh, you're fine.
Hayden primarily hunts, that he likes to hunt private clubs or private places and kind of do his own management. I'm more of on like the public side, right? Public hunting side. That's more of the side I'm passionate about. But noticing and just kind of knowing for a while how much ducks love Smartweed, and you brought that up, and so I was curious. I had a question this last season, and it's like, how do you effectively manage for Smartweed? So I don't want to try to answer this for you. I don't really know, but I know with Hayden's on the does commercial dove hunting as well for South Texas Hunting Outfitters, and I know in some of those situations with like croton, which dove use a lot, they'll just spray other areas to kill the croton rather than planting it. Like, how does that is that kind of similar to what y'all would do with Smartweed, or is there actually a commercial way to plant Smartweed, or a more
There,
maybe commercial is not the word.
so there is a commercial way you can plant it. I don't see people doing it a lot, but let's say I wanted to go and buy smartweed. I think Kester's Nursery is one out there. You got a great Refuge seed company over on the West Coast that does an awesome job with it. And there's a few more out there that you can find to actually purchase smartweed seed and put it out if you don't have it. But and I started public land hunting, so but it was in the sound and in the ocean and all that. So sea ducks, diver ducks didn't really chase the smartweed piles for
Right.
natural vegetation. But yeah, if you want to do it right, there's 3 separate drawdown times that you typically can do. So you can start maybe end of March into April and start a drawdown up until around May. That's kind of your first period drawdown, at least in my area. And smartweed will start to grow a little quicker because it's a broadleaf. However, you start to get a lot of those undesirable weeds that you don't want. They could be invasives. For us, it's Phragmites. I don't know if y'all have ever seen that, but if you do, you're gonna hate it. It's like a reed, and it just expands and expands and expands. The next thing you know, like I'm dealing with right now in our willows, the main spot that we used to have a lot of smartweed come up, it's over. It's just consumed by Phragmites, and it's took over my smartweed. I can't get a good stand of it. But if If you're managing for it, you can draw down a little early. It'll get it to come up really quick versus if you do like a mid or a late drawdown. So like going into June and July's and doing the drawdowns there, you typically see more barnyard grass come up and other moist soils. But smartweed's very, very resilient. You should be able to get it no matter what drawdown you do. However, if you do it a little early, you should see a lot more smartweed come up. But it's mainly holding water and keeping that soil really, really wet. And if you keep it really wet, a lot of your other weeds they can't grow. And smartweed does a fantastic job of doing that. I
Yeah.
know there's so two of my places in the areas where it's really deep. When I say deep, it's like waist deep during the summer. As it's got a little bowl, and my smartweed, as long as my water's clear, it will grow through that 2 to 3 foot water and even breach the top of it and come right on out. Whereas I've got other areas I'll draw down and there's little bowls, but they might hold 2 to 3 inches of water here and there. So you get those periodic rain showers that come in to kind of keep the puddle there. My smartweed loves that. Um, so you can get there's several types, but mainly you always hear people talk about pink smartweed, or you'll hear them talk about swamp smartweed, which really doesn't produce a lot of seed. It just kind of moves along the ground and can really be an inconvenience to you. More invertebrates, whereas you get like the pale or white smartweed, and that's a really good smartweed for the animals as well, or for waterfowl. But all similar practices. Fantastic. If you can find them on public lands, absolutely go after them because the ducks are going to be there.
Well,
What?
I was looking back on a picture. Clayton and I and some buddies went teal hunting at a place, and when Clayton first got his first airboat, and we were hunting this hole, and I saw the airboat was sitting there. It was before I even knew what smartweed was, but that's what we were hunting. And it was just all flooded smartweed, and man, the ducks were in there. You know, it was a spot on public land, but that was the X, you know. And I saw
Yeah,
that picture, and I said, man, that's exactly why they were there, you know. But essentially, what you're saying is it's all about the drawdown.
it
You know,
is.
drawing your water down at a certain time.
Yeah, it's all about managing your water on it. And the great thing about smartweed is, right, if it rains or you get too much water, it's still going to grow. As long as it's clear and that sun can hit that plant, it's still going to grow. Where your other, your crops that you would farm, you'd be at a loss with it. So if you can find smartweed, especially on public land, hit it up. It's been around for no telling how long. Ducks know what it is, and that's really if I had larger properties like 1,000 acres to manage for, I'd probably put 600 acres in nothing but moist soil, because you have a large amount of it, and those ducks they're going to hammer it. It's a warm season, or I say a warm season food, meaning we have really mild winters these days, and when the water temperatures get a little hotter, those ducks ain't looking for corn. I mean, they're looking for smartweed, barnyard grass, and you're going to annihilate ducks over top of it. Now, they might not come in the thousands or the hundreds, right? But you should be able to trickle out a limit over time, especially during the mornings.
Yeah.
So
So can you tell us about Golden Millet, the evolution of Golden Millet, and how Golden Millet's different from your Chiwapa and Japanese and all that?
I can, and as a matter of fact, I had a conversation with Golden Millet today because I'm getting orders in. I've tried to track down the origins of both of these. And there's been a bunch of stories out there about where it came from, but as far as I understand, I think it's Ronnie Helms out of Studgar, Arkansas, is the patent holder of it. And it came from a Japanese millet crossed with a barnyard grass. And that's where you get golden millet. I was a little bit confused because golden millet has a really big head on it to be so small. Um, and when I look at Japanese millet, the head's not really that big and full. However, I was just like, if you look at barnyard grass, it doesn't really have a big head. So how in the world did you cross these two plants together to really get that big? I mean, I've got some that are size almost of a Coca-Cola can. Some of the farmers, are applying millet or applying fertilizer to it, so they're really getting it up high. Um, but golden millet, it it holds its structure very well, even in during the winter. As it continues, even when you get it wet, it'll continue to grow after it gets a certain height. You can add water like Japanese millet and barnyard grass, but it's 60 days maturity. You can start seeing heads by around 30 to 45 days on it. And I mean, just it holds its structure, and just the sheer amount of seed that little plant produces is ridiculous. And I've seen the comparison between Japanese millet and golden millet because I used to start with Japanese and brown top. And I found that when I would flood my Japanese millet, the structure of the plant would fall over very quickly. It's great for invertebrates, right? And the seed is available to the ducks. However, you could take a Japanese or a swamp, plant it full of Japanese millet, and the minute it floods back up, it seems like those ducks just nail it and it's done. You walk around the swamp, there's no more seed. With golden, I've noticed that it'll still stay as far as structure wise. You'll still see it here and there, and you might think that the swamp doesn't have any more millet in there. But the minute you walk around or in the impoundment and you're kicking around in the dirt, all this seed comes up. And even now, if you check like social media, you'll see I have a lot of volunteer golden millet come up the next year, which is great. So any areas I have volunteer come up, it might mature early and it might reseed again and grow up again. However, I can manipulate that millet because I didn't plant it. With Japanese, I see some volunteer rate, but not the high volunteer rate I see with golden millet. I think it has a lot to do with the barnyard grass that it was crossed with.
When you say
We
volunteer rate, what do you mean by that? I'm not familiar with that term.
Okay, so when you take like, have you ever planted a garden, harvested garden or whatever, and then you don't take, or let's say you don't disc the garden at all that season, and then the next year you're getting ready to do your garden, but all of a sudden you notice that some of those plants are coming back.
Mhm.
That's what I mean by volunteer. Meaning I did not physically go out there and plant the crop. It just sprung up on its own natural cycle.
we have that happen with sunflowers a lot in Texas, wild sunflowers.
Yeah, that we've seen. I probably need to send you a picture of it. We hunted a reservoir in season 1 of Fowl Minds, and then one in season 2, which will come out this summer in August. But both cases, the reservoir, as far as I can tell, it looked to be wild millet. I don't know if that was. I think at one point it was maybe planted by the state, or maybe it was even barnyard grass. That used to be one of our in wildlife judging in high school. It used to be one of our plants, so I'm kind of embarrassed. I don't even remember what that looks like anymore. But it may have been barnyard grass. But that I don't know if it's hard for me to believe that it was not at least at one point put out there by the state or whoever, just because it's out, like one of the reservoirs just in the barren desert, right? So it's kind of hard to imagine that something would grow that good annually. But that makes a lot of sense, because I know regardless of how it got there, that volunteer rate, which I guess barnyard grass probably lends itself to the easiest suggestion there, as it's a wild grass, right? So
Right.
it needs that volunteer rate to even survive, or to evolved based on that volunteer rate, I would assume.
And here's another thing, right? Let's say you have your wild barnyard grasses all across the country. Well, over in California, there might be a different strand, or there's going to be a different strand of barnyard grass, but it might produce a bigger seed head than the barnyard grass I'm thinking of in North Carolina. So it's my understanding they used a wild millet from California to cross over with Japanese millet to create golden millet. So that could be where those big heads are. There's also, I think it's Walter's water millet, which they call a wild millet as well. Um, it produces a really big seed head on it, and so it could be that cross. I've never planted what they call wild millet or Walter's water millet before. However, I have seen it, and it's very interesting.
Hmm.
Uh, so
You know, we were talking about corn. You said you were backing off on corn, and so are we. But it's not only an expense issue, but it's also a lot easier to plant millet, right?
Right.
Can
Abs-
you talk a little bit about the planting process y'all do?
Absolutely. I I grab a Budweiser and I hop on the side by side and I just toss it in a seeder and
Do you plow or
drive through the field.
do you plow it or anything before, or you planting on
Sometimes,
grass or?
sometimes I'll get so there's I've been trying a lot of different things, but sometimes when the farmer goes out there to disc up the corn, I'll say, "Hey, do you mind going over these units and just running a couple of strip disking through there?" And he'll do that for me now. It saves me from having to do a little disking if I needed to do it. Um, and I'll just go, 20, 25 pounds and do that rate per acre with a spreader on the front of the four wheeler or on the Ranger and just do it like that. There's been occasions in certain spots I was really, really worried about getting stuck. So I pulled a Huckleberry Finn where I just rolled up my pants legs and walked through the mud and
Yeah.
just seeded it that way. I've, I've tried all different types of rates. So I've overseeded it and underseeded it. I did find that if you do overseed your millet, it's gonna hurt you more than if you underseed it because it's gonna grow that tall and it's
Yeah.
gonna look like your front yard if it's manicured. The seed heads are only gonna get about that big because they choke each other out. Whereas it's it's similar to rice too, where they say if you plant rice, try to space it out a little further because it'll grow bigger. And that's true, I think, with all your millets. And it would vegetation in general, if they don't have any competition around them, they can grow to their full potential. So um, if I feel like when I'm planting, I can start to seed too much millet, I'll actually cut back. And when I'm seeding the right rate, sometimes I know I'm doing it right, but I just visually I'm like, man, I'm not hearing it slap the ground. I'm not seeing a pile of it everywhere. And that's not what you want to do. So if you don't have mud exposed and you have a lot of weeds, I highly suggest you trying to run a disc through there. You don't have to make it look like an infield of a baseball, stadium, but you can run a disc through there and then just drive your side by side and just seed it out and just be done with it. Wipe your hands.
That you know what we did, we didn't plant any in Texas. We're going to this year. We're probably gonna, we've got one duck hole it's gonna be 40 acres of water, and we're probably gonna plant 15 acres of millet in it, and flood it late. But what we did in Mississippi this year was like the bottom ends of the fields, we planted that, and we didn't have to plow anything, but a lot of our just duck holes, like our timber holes and stuff, we planted that. And I ran into that same issue in a couple of the places. I noticed that, the whole plant was probably a foot to 16 inches tall, and the head was only 3 inches. It had seed on it, but there just wasn't a whole lot. And this year I'm going to back off of some. But another question I see a lot on the internet is, and I'm no expert by no means, so I usually don't ever say anything, but different parts of the country get cold faster, get or freeze quicker. So like in Mississippi, we got to plant a lot earlier than we do in Texas. In Texas, sometimes we won't get our first freeze till after Thanksgiving. Um, when do you plant, and when do you flood your millet where
All
you're
right.
at?
So I'm right here in North Carolina. I guess we're midway across the state, right there at the top of the Dixie. Um, I will plant mine in different stages because I want to see how it like basically reacts and when it matures to a degree. But the latest I would plant here would be mid-August up to Labor Day, and you're really stretching it, right? I'm going based on if I go that late, I'm basically in a jam, or I'm thinking we're gonna have a mild winter, and I'm really weighing those risks, right? Because we could have a cold snap for 2 days in October, and I'm done. Like I'm screwed. Or September, we've had Sometimes it's dropped down a little cold for 2 or 3 days there, and that could really slow down the process. But you want to make sure that you have enough heating units during the day. So you got a certain amount of temperature, let's say above 70 degrees for at least 8 hours a day, and it doesn't get really cold during the night. You can get away with it. In North Carolina, I'll start some. I'll start at the beginning of July. I'll do some mid-July, some end of July, and then whatever's left, I want to make sure I have it done the first 2 weeks of August right away. And when I flood it in my places, because I know people around me are going to be flooding corn and things like that, I'll try to hold off as long as I can to flood so I have fresh food. With millets, if you don't have corn and you're okay with it and you got a bigger area, I would highly suggest go ahead and start flooding it a little early. Try to start flooding it in September. We have blue wing teal season here. We get pushes of them, but it's not that great. However, if you can get water on it early and you've got enough food in other places that you can hold off, go ahead and take you and flood you a couple of units early in September while it's still a little warm, or even in mid-August, and start building those invertebrate pools back up. One of the things I've heard on a podcast is about rice. They go down there and they harvest all that rice and they sell blinds in each of the rice units. Well, it seems like the very first unit that they add water back onto it seems to be the go-to unit to kill ducks out of. And it's not because there's rice in the field, but it's because it was flooded early and the invertebrates, they had time to build back up the population very quickly. And
That's a yep.
go ahead.
That's a lot
So
of what we have. You know, where I hunt on the prairie is all rice, and we get a second cut of rice. And normally the teal will go to the rice first. Then after they, feed the rice for a while, build up their fat on their body, then they'll go to the invertebrates normally, like your moist soil and stuff. But and it all just depends on the year. But we hunt a lot of rice fields. I'm very familiar with that.
and it's the same with your millets and really any other crop that's like that. If you can add water early, obviously some of your millets will continue to grow when you have water on there, so it doesn't really hurt them that bad. And you just start to let that invertebrate pool build back up. The other thing is when you're pumping with millet, if you're pumping from like we get to pump from canal ditches, so the invertebrates are already in there. We're just putting water into our unit and we're just pumping invertebrates in there. Whereas some people they draw from a well, and when you draw from a well, you're bringing all those minerals up. There's no invertebrates, and it takes time for that water to get acclimated to the environment, and then it takes a while for it to build up with invertebrates. If you pump later and it's colder, obviously that's going to get reduced, right? So that's a major key factor. That's why in the 10-acre impoundment that I usually post a lot of pictures on, we have that, I guess you call, little bowls around our willows, and we try to keep water in there because as we start to add water, well, all that is just like a huge incest of invertebrates. It's just been hanging out with smartweed in the willows, and the minute we start flooding it and it goes out into the fields, they just spread.
Yeah.
And we have a pile and pile of wood ducks. Um, I tell people, they say, "Oh, I know what a wood duck hunt is." I'm like, "Well, come and hang out right quick." And then you have 200 wood ducks come in front of your face in one wave, and you fall back like, "I ain't never seen them come in like teal before." You just kind of shake your head like, "Get ready. This wood duck hunt, it don't end till past 9 o'clock. They just keep pouring in."
Wow. Yeah, I've never been on one that didn't. Normally when the wood ducks come in, it's the first 20, 30 minutes of daylight and it's over.
Yeah,
I was talking to an old timer from Arkansas. We were talking about moist soil because they do a lot of it up there in his club. And, it's really there's no science behind it. It's more of an art, just lots of trial and error, to experimenting. And I think this year we got lucky on accident, but now I kind of have a better idea of what to do and how to do it. So you're always improving, I feel like that's just how we are as waterfowl hunters. there's always tomorrow, there's always next week, there's always next month, too cold, too hot, too windy, the moon.
It's
It's
the
not
worst game to chase. It really is.
it's not like the deer hunters. We're gonna go fill our feeder up and kill a deer,
No, it's the worst. I tell people, I'm like, if you want to lose your hair, start water fowl hunting. You're
That's
gonna lose
right.
your hair. The other catch with moist soil that I've noticed is if you're trying to get into a moist soil unit, and let's say you had an old cornfield, um, go ahead, run half the field and disc it before you flood it. So go ahead and stir up that soil bank. Go ahead and stir it up, disc it up, flood over top of it. You're making whatever soil or whatever seeds in that soil available for the ducks to dabble on. Plus, there's this new talk about grit, right? Getting pebbles and stuff in the crawl to help digest some of this food they take down. Um, but if you disc before you flood, basically the next year when you do your drawdown, that seed is already sitting at the top of your soil bank ready to sprout. So if you have moist soil, or excuse me, if you have smartweed there, you should know right away. It should start coming up right away as you start to draw down. So that's another catch. Old timers would always say, they would do their garden and then they would go ahead and disc it in, right? Disc right after they get done with farming, and they would let it set all year long, and then they would plant the following year like that. They say that has to do with all the little bugs and critters they're sitting under the soil. It helps it build it up. So you just apply it to moist soil.
Yeah. So like in Texas, our big duck season opens the first Saturday in November. When would you recommend planting golden millet to have it matured, ready to go? Just say to flood it by October 1st.
If you said November or October, November.
Well, we open November, there's say November 5th, we open. I'd like to put water on it a month before,
Let them get established.
yeah, just let them find it, When would you recommend planting so that it's ready, say by October 1st?
If you're going to start putting water on it October 1st, if you can slowly raise it up, you could get away with beginning of September. At least let it get 30 days and then slowly add water on it so that you don't overdo the plant and make it stress out. But it should continue to grow as you add a few inches at a time. But if you're just going to go ahead and just cap it off and flood it, I'd do first week of August, second week of August at latest.
Yeah.
So it's full maturity, and then you just dump the water right on top of it and let it rock and roll. But again, I've never been to Texas. I really want to go, and it just depends on your soil type. Everything around here is on the coast is black as tar. But then as you go towards Piedmont and the mountains, you get that real clay, red dirt soil that everybody talks about down south. And it makes the plant grow different.
We got a little sandy loam and sandy. It just depends where you're at, but you have to come down and hunt with us. It's different.
I'd love to go to Texas. Or I've missed my opportunity last year because we were supposed to have our second daughter. So I had the extension to go out there. I just never made it out. I couldn't risk it. My wife would shoot me.
Oh, I understand that.
John, you're Hayden's expecting his third daughter as well. You're a girl dad, or you have a boy as well?
I am a girl dad. I have one that is about to turn 4 coming up in May, and then we had Eloise. She was due last September, and we had bad news on the day of delivery. But we were fortunate to have a lot of family support, and we made it through those hard times. And now I'm still here. I have 2 daughters. One's in heaven and one's on earth. So I'm blessed.
Yeah,
Sorry
definitely.
about that, man.
I appreciate it.
Well, have you ever been teal hunting in Texas?
No, and that's what I was going to do.
That's pretty, big ducks, on a good year, normal year, we can get them, but teal season, man, it's incredible. You know, it's fun. You have to come down and hunt. Clayton's got an airboat and he hunts a lot of the public stuff, and I got a bunch of private land I can hunt. So between the two of us, we'll find a good place to take you teal hunting this year if you want to come
Well,
down.
well, I appreciate the invite, certainly. So
Yeah.
I hope to get down there. Now they're talking about Canada. I heard they've already extended the or they didn't extend it, but they put the rules in place for 7 days in Manitoba. I'm guessing it's not going to be long. Maybe next year, it'll probably go west to like Saskatchewan and further. But I was supposed to go to Canada this year as well, and I'm, I'm like, I need to go ahead and go up there while I can, because if you've never been to Canada, do it now, because later on it's going to be really hard.
Yeah.
With the gun, I forget what bill it was, but the one where they were trying to ban, I didn't even look at the list of guns, but one of them I think was called the wildfowler. So I'm assuming that was a shotgun.
It's like every gun, man. They're trying to
Yeah.
ban. Like,
Yeah. Pistols are gone. I don't think you can purchase another pistol or trade another pistol in Canada.
Yeah, I know you had to have, at least in the past, you had to have some kind of special license. So it sounds like they removed that ability.
They did.
Jeez Louise.
And then Manitoba just put in a rule in effect. Basically, this year I think you can apply for the lottery draw to get a 7-day pass to waterfowl hunt, or you can go through an outfitter to get it. And I think everybody that applies this year gets it, but you're still only allowed 7 days. Where used to, you just crossed the border, and if you knew farmers, you knocked on their door and said, "Hey," and you hunt. That's not the case now. You can't go up there and hunt all month if you were in that position where you'd rent a house and go and hunt all month, just because you had it that way, or you were an outfitter that was up there. I think you got to own land.
yeah.
And you had to purchase your land before 2023. So that thing had to have been in the works for 2 years plus. And if it's happened here, I guarantee you the talks are in Saskatchewan. They've probably already gone on, and it'll be just keep going west and west and west till you only get 7 days up there, or you have to go through an outfitter that's already established.
That's gonna hurt a lot of people.
I've been to, we hunted some graders for a friend's bachelor party that I'd planned. We went to October, which is far different from the style of hunting that we have a friend that goes every year to Alberta. But it was we went October when their goose season started. So we were hunting graders and catching giant bluefin tuna. That was a
Oh,
fun bachelor trip. We would alternate days. We'd give them a chance to scout while we were tuna fishing, and the next day we'd go hunt graders, and it was pretty fun. But it wasn't the pictures and video I've seen from Alberta, Saskatchewan, Manitoba. I mean, it wasn't anything like that. So
I'd still like to do the bluefin tuna if that's
Oh.
what y'all were after.
Oh yeah, I guess y'all see some there in the near the sound, right?
Yeah, they sit right off the coast. Like the Outer Banks Wicked Tuna Show. A lot of the guys out of like Hatteras and Ocracoke and Nags Head, Oregon Inlet, they all chase them. Absolutely.
So it's called is it the Pamlico? How do you pronounce that? Pamlico?
Pamlico.
Pamlico Sound. Okay. So I've never even talked to anybody that's hunted it, but me and a friend had we were planning to take an adventure there on a duck hunt, because I've heard you can shoot some sea ducks there in the sound.
You can.
What's that? Yeah.
You can. Yep.
And then so he was all amped up, and he's a marine biologist. And then whenever I told him that they pinged that 25-foot great white in the sound, he's like, "I'm out. I'm completely out." I was like, "Come on, man. You'd see hell if you're in shallow enough." Well, I guess not for the sea ducks. I was about to say, in the typical water depths, you'd see a fin coming from a mile away, something that big. But
actually, you can. It's really interesting with the way sea duck hunting works in North Carolina, but they have a few different seasons, and then they got a special sea duck zone. But when that shark pinged, it pinged right off an island that I was at on that day, and it probably was 150, 200 yards from me.
wow.
when it pinged. And I was out there by myself, diver hunting and sea duck hunting, because you can see, like, you can, some of the public land, depending on the season, you can actually hunt sea ducks as long as you are on shore. You can hunt sea ducks up to a certain proportion of a month. And then after that, the duck season goes out, but the special sea duck zone comes in. So then you can only harvest the sea duck if you're 800 yards away from shore. So you have to drive out past 800 yards, set up for sea duck hunting, and shoot in the special sea duck zone. And I think there's a limit of 5 ducks. But then as the season goes on and the very end of the season opens, then you can shoot sea ducks on shore again, and you can shoot them in the special sea duck zone. And I, I've asked game wardens, and you get different stories from each one, but some will say, "Hey, yes, you can go out, sit on the shore, shoot your 6 ducks, such as puddlers and divers. Go in, tag those, keep those in your truck, and then hop in your boat and drive out to the special sea duck zone and shoot 5 sea ducks."
Hmm.
Um, I've heard different stories, so I've never done it personally, but
Why
again,
not let the people from Louisiana find out about that?
yeah, so technically you can shoot 11 ducks a day, and I think the bag limit, possession bag limits, um, I think 12, so 2 limits. So technically you could go in one day and let's say you shoot your 5 sea ducks, come home, then walk out in the swamp and shoot your 6 puddlers.
Hmm.
You better have them tagged, and you better hope that game warden knows you and you're dealing with the right game warden. But I've asked a couple because I've heard people doing it, and I'm like, a little too sketchy for me. But the regulations are there. You can read between the gray lines.
Yeah. John, can you tell us about the Duck Hole Company and how people can get a hold of you?
Yeah, absolutely. So I started the Ducko company a couple of years back, and basically, I was in Ducks Unlimited, a chapter around here, and some fellas that I was with at the end, they would always go where I came from, Chalkawinity. They would go right down the road to Hyde County and hunt, and they said, "Hey, look, we got an impoundment. Come visit us." And I was like, "Well, I'm a public land hunter. I don't mess with the private stuff. That's a little too snooty for me. I like to rough it out." And as I got a little older, I started hunting with them in the private land, and it was all corn. And I was like, expecting this absolutely amazing hunt, and then we get in there, and I was basically told, "Hey, we'll probably shoot less than a handful, and then as soon as shooting light's over with, get ready to see the show because there's going to be thousands of ducks dumping in." And I was like, "Well, that's not what I've heard. Private land's where it's at. You're guaranteed a limit." And they started, chuckling a little bit. And so the first 2 years of hunting with them, that's what it was. We'd shoot 1 or 2 ducks, and all of a sudden everything would just pour out of everywhere and dump in front of us. And I said, "Is this what y'all have been doing?" And they're like, "Yeah, this is how it is." I said, "Well, do you mind if I plant some things and try some stuff?" And they were like, "Certainly." And so the duck hole company was born. I started planting, and we started shooting a few more ducks year over year, and started identifying the seeds that I really like. And Golden Millet was one of them. They said, "Hey, you order enough, why don't you become a dealer?" And started becoming a dealer. And then I was like, "Well, I gotta have a company name." And one of my buddies was like, "Why don't you just call it the Duck Hole and Company?" And I said, "Okay." And so then started doing that. People started seeing my success and asking if I would help with, consulting with them. And at first it was, "Hey, just give me a call and talk to me." I'm a data scientist by heart, and I really geek out on those things and how to attract ducks. And I just went down that rabbit hole and started consulting some. And then I found, I was looking for alternatives for corn. I've tried rice and milo and soybeans and every type of millet. And that's when I came across Chiwapa millet. Took me a while to get it, but when I landed across it, I was like, "All right, this I can see replacing corn." Um, so I tested it last year and had great success. They've made me a dealer at Chiwapa this year. So now I have Chiwapa that I sell for the duck hole company, and I have Golden.
So
And I
if somebody from Texas, like if Clayton, I bought that Golden Millet in Mississippi through I think it was Specialty Seed Company is who we got it from. Um, if we wanted to buy Golden Millet from you here in Texas, how would we get it from you?
I wouldn't sell it to you. I,
Okay.
I'm not so let me be clear with especially a lot of my customers. Like I sell seed. It started off as kind of like a co-op. I was just trying to help out the ducks. There's nothing but corn everywhere, and I don't know if y'all know much about Lake Mesquite, but we don't have any subaquatic vegetation in Lake Mesquite. It used to be the duck capital of the world years and years ago before I think Arkansas and everybody, like the ducks pounded Lake Mesquite, and they would come down the Atlantic Flyway back during the marketing days. You know, they were marketing for ducks and basically harvesting piles and piles with punt guns. But the old timers would say that Lake Mesquite had so many ducks on it, it literally would block out the sun. And over time, with they introduced carp, wiped out all the subaquatic vegetation in the lake. It's ridiculous. It's a desert. So the ducks now go to the corn in the evenings and eat, and then they go sit out on the lake. There
Yeah.
are some natural refuges around there that hold some ducks, but it's mainly moist soil. But it's still not a vast majority like of the size of the lake it is. Um, so I started saying, okay, what can we do to help the ducks out? And next thing you know, people were like, hey, don't tell people your secret about golden millet. And I was like, no, screw that. Um, I'd rather my neighbor have golden millet versus corn to help the ducks out versus, you know, just me having it. I want the whole place to be wrapped up in barnyard grass, moist soil. Let's bring it back to the old ways. Let's give them something they don't have. Or they're, they used to have a limited resource. And so yeah, the duck hole company was born. I started selling seed, and people saw my success, and I started, going down the subaquatic vegetation, the moist soil, aquatics, just trying to find anything to attract a duck. And people started reaching out. But I do manage a few pieces of property part time while I do my main job. And I ask for references if people come to me and they're like, "Hey, I want you to give me a land plan and manage my land." I basically ask for references. I'm like, well, besides seeing me through social media, has anybody referenced you? And some people are like, yes, this is the person that told me, and I'll call that person, find out who I'm about to go, walk on a property with, and what is their financial situation, what is their goals. Are they out there just to shoot a bunch of ducks, or do they really care about wildlife? And I just kind of vet them out. um, a-
Smart. That's very smart.
and people are like, well, why don't you just do it for everybody? I'm like, look, I got a main job, it pays my bills. I don't want to deal with the headache in my spare time. So if my customers are great people, I like them, we're alike, we have the same goals in life and objectives, then let's roll with it. If I have somebody that comes to me and then, I don't have to worry about them just coming to me for a year. Most of my customers are like, hey, look, I'm hiring you. We're going to do it all the way through. I'm like, good to go. Here's the plan. Let's execute it. Otherwise, here's the plan. Y'all go execute it. Enjoy. Um, if you stick to the plan, it should work. If you don't stick to the plan, don't come back to me and tell me it failed. I can't. What is it? I can't lead a horse to water and make it drink.
That's right.
So, but yeah, now I'm selling a bunch of seed, doing a couple of different land consultants, talking to a bunch of people on the phone that want to fly me out or asking for my consultant prices, and I have to put up my hand up and say, "Oh, what are you doing?" And you know what? I'm sure I can walk you through some of my ideas, and you just build off of that. And I'm sure I can find somebody local that would be a great person for you. Or have you worked with your farmer? Talk to your farmer. I'm always trying to put the money in the farmer's pocket because they've got the equipment, and let the professionals do the planting. Um, Why drag my tractor and everything out there to do something when there's already somebody there that's doing it?
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
I got maybe an interesting question for you. So to the people listening, maybe for the people listening that don't, maybe they just lease a cattle farm. There's not currently a farmer on it. Or it sounds like, you know, like you were mentioning, it's strip disking and stuff. It sounds like a lot of these different plants you might plant for duck food, they could be planted with just minimal farm equipment, almost like they're doing with food plots. Some people's like deer food plots, let's say. So like maybe minimal equipment. If you had a four wheeler, let's say, would something like that be possible? Or I guess if you could just like walk me through if you were limited to a four wheeler and maybe what you could get to pull behind or rent at Tractor Supply, what would you do?
I started out no four wheeler, just my truck, and I would fill a hand seeder up or a bag seeder up. I would walk the place without even disking it. I'd walk it and spread it that way. And as soon as I got done spreading, I would walk with a backpack sprayer and I would spray everything and kill everything on top of the seed. Because Roundup, right, once it hits the ground, it's supposed to be non-effective. It's got to hit the plant. So I would just spray all the plants and kill it. That would lay down over the seed, and then I would get a decent germination rate. And you can start there. If you've got a mud flat, as soon as that mud flat's exposed, walk out there in your tennis shoes or barefooted with a seeder and just seed and spread it. It will grow.
Well,
Um, if you have a four wheeler, I would say a sprayer and a drag. So go out there, spray, kill everything, seed it, and then drag over top of it. You might drag bunches of vegetation. I call them like invertebrate rolls or sushi rolls because basically when you're dragging, you got those long tines, and they're a lot of people hate it. It just makes a mat of vegetation under the drag. I'll stop every now and then. I'll pull the drag off, flip it back, get all the vegetation of it off, and then put the drag back up and keep dragging. And what it does is I'll have like clumps, like if you were mowing wet grass out there, and that seed will get contracted in that wet mats along with invertebrates and bugs. So when you're flooding, it's just like a floating pile of bait, basically just full of bugs for the ducks to hit. And then the rest of the time, most of the time, it just all grows. Very, very minimum work. You could call it lazy farming for ducks.
I like that.
yeah, that's really cool. I think a lot of people will be interested in hearing that. I know when we were,
Oh.
my buddy Corey and I were 16, we had some accident. That's all we had was four wheelers, and we were hoping a farmer would come help us out. And I think they eventually did when I got off the lease and I started doing more public stuff. But yeah, that's very interesting. Yeah, it doesn't sound like it's so I guess what would you, it sounds like since Smartweed's an option, but what else would you recommend planting in a scenario where you couldn't get a good disc? I know you mentioned that some of them were, it might competing with other vegetation, some thrive better than others. Is that right?
That's right. Not, I think we got off topic, but let's go back to the millets right quick because this will answer some of your questions.
Hmm.
So let's say you've got an area that the water's hard to control, but it can either get super dry or super wet. My usually go-to back in the day would be Japanese millet and brown top millet, and I would seed it together. I'd even toss some pearl millet in there from time to time. And what would happen is I would go out, I'd hand seed it. If I was getting a lot of rain, it was staying really wet, the Japanese would grow. And then if it would get really dry, the brown top or pearl millet would come up, which was great, right? You either got one or the other, and you're kind of hedging your bet. Well, and
Yeah.
then when I found golden millet, I was like, wait a minute, I don't have to buy 2 bags of seed. I can buy 1 bag because golden millet, it'll grow in damp soil up to wet soil for most part, and it'll grow pretty good in dry soil. So that's another reason I went. It's a little more expensive a bag versus your brown top and your jab. But again, you're not having to buy 2 bags. and you're not really having to hedge your bets because golden millet, it's going to take off no matter what. I've had it grow right there in the crevice of my pants that I had rolled up.
Huh.
The other options, I've tried rice. I like it. However, I've noticed that when I was doing dirty rice, I was popping those seed heads open. They'd be empty, so the bugs were really hitting it hard. However, I'm not against rice whatsoever. I'm actually going to do some this year, but in North Carolina, the Clearfield variety rice that a lot of states allow that you can spray, we don't allow it here in North Carolina to spray.
Mm.
So it's really hard to keep your rice good unless you can actually use water control for those weeds.
Yeah, keep it on
I-
the field.
yeah, and then you almost have to have a or a crop scout to make sure you're not getting a lot of bugs in there. Army worms is a real bad one that really hits everybody. There's different things you can do for it, but we can also look at Chiwapa because we haven't talked about Chiwapa much, but it's a hybrid as well. I thought originally it came from Chiwapa County, but I believe it's a cross between Japanese millet and a wild millet from Chiwapa County, possibly. But it's a 120-day millet, and it really hedges your bets. So it can get really tall if you add fertilizer. I mean, you can reach heights 10 foot, 12 foot. If you just are seeding it naturally, I think 6 to 8 foot is most of the time. You do need to do it a little smaller or a lower rate. I wouldn't go high rate because it will stun it, but it produces a seed head about that big, almost like Milo, real thick. But the seed itself is the size of a normal, like Japanese or golden millet seed. Very tiny, but I really like it because it's 120 days and you can plant it where it's really, really wet or somewhat dry. And as it comes up, if you get a heavy rain, it'll continue to grow on water. The more water you add, as you keep a certain percentage of the plant out of the water, it will continue to grow higher and higher. It's a fantastic plant. It holds up. From what I've seen, it holds up really well throughout the season, and it provides abundance of seed and it provides an abundance of cover because it's like twice the size, 3 times the size of your typical millet, and it just provides a lot of forage, a lot of places for invertebrates, and a lot of cover. And I'm really, really liking it. And so I pulled the trigger and said, you know what? Yes, I will be a diller. I will have an alternative for corn, and then I'll have my short season golden millet. Just kind of add icing on the cake like I always do.
Yeah.
Hope that answered your question, Clayton.
Yeah.
Yeah.
We planted some of that last year and did really good. Real good. I got some pictures I'll share with Clayton he can put on here.
Okay.
Of all of them really, but they did good. But
Yeah.
man, I
I,
appreciate. Go ahead, Clayton. Sorry.
Oh no, I was gonna say, I guess you can message us where, and I'll put it up on the screen in post editing, like where people might contact you or where people would contact you to get a hold about the duck hole company.
oh, absolutely. Um, well, I will say you can follow me at the Duck Hole Company on Facebook, TikTok, Instagram. That's probably the best communication to get through to me. It's better to reach out through me through social media, or you can contact me directly. I'm on the dealers list for Golden Millet. You'll see the Duck Hole Company, myself, and I've brought a partner in to help me with seed sales. Just move it because it's hard to be in two places at one time.
Yeah. Man, I can't thank you enough for taking the time out of your Monday to jump on this with Clayton and I. This is something that I've become really fascinated with, and I enjoy the whole process of summertime working on the duck holes to actually standing in the duck hole and filling up a strap. So to get the opportunity to talk to an expert like you is really cool for us, and I just want to thank you for jumping on here with us, man. We appreciate it.
No problem. And I got plenty of time if y'all want to stay a little later. Um, Perfectly fine with that. I'm in no rush, but I appreciate the opportunity to be on your podcast and thank y'all for reaching out. And also, if if you start to, really getting into planning, you're going to end up setting your gun down. At least I have. My friends get mad at me because now it's like I let them shoot, and they're like, "Why aren't you picking up the gun?" I'm like, "I'm trying to see where the other ducks are landing. I want to know why they're landing there."
Yeah.
And when I send the dogs to go get the ducks, like the dogs are going to get the ducks, and I'm going this way because I saw ducks land over here on this side of the pond, and I'm like, "What is over here? Is there more seed left, or do I see a pool of some invertebrates or bugs swimming around? Is there a random plant that I just didn't pick up on?" Um, like I'm kicking around like those sushi rolls I keep talking about, the bug rolls. A lot of the times I find the ducks on those, and I'll walk over there and I'll like kick that roll around, and you'll see little spiders and everything else just swimming all around it. It's very interesting to me. So now I'm all about trying to attract as many ducks.
Yeah, same here, man. That's just, you gotta, it's what we love, it's our passion, and got to make it better for them so they're here for our grandkids.
Yeah. I'm trying to pack them as much food as they can when they head north, and they don't get that from corn. Yeah, I'm sorry. The hen needs a lot of calcium for her eggs. She eats a lot, and then she has to fly back and lay. She's not going to get that calcium from corn. There's bugs on corn, but not like these grasses that we have. So the more grass that you can put there, the more natural stuff you can have there. That's more opportunity for like spiders, snails, two big ones. They got shells. Those shells, when they crumble, they're made of calcium.
Mm.
That's
Yeah.
why them ducks want to eat that. That's a lot of the hens. I tell folks, don't shoot my hen wood ducks, even in the owners. They're like, what am I supposed I say, don't shoot them. They're like, well, why not? I'm like, just let them hang out. We need them to repopulate the wood duck boxes. And we got all these invertebrates around here. They're gonna have plenty of food for their eggs. Like, just avoid shooting them. And then any hens that are coming in here, I guarantee you they're coming into this hole because they can't find the resources that they need from those cornfields way over there. So they're coming here.
Take it easy on the hens, Hayden. Take it easy on them hens.
I'm getting better. Getting
Look,
better.
I we don't I don't chase mallards around here because we don't really get that flight path, but we do get the black ducks. There are mallards here, and people are mallard fanatics, but I'm a
Yeah.
wood duck fanatic. I have a lot of wood duck boxes out, and we've got. I mean, when I was telling you about this wood duck hole, it's got a pile of wood ducks in there. I think I had a video posted earlier where there was a bunch of birds flying out, and it was early season, and I think it was like 100 or something. It was flying around, and that was just wood ducks coming out from where I was riding around the dike. And then what I didn't post is as I got on around the dike, like 600 more wood ducks got up.
Oh
So
yeah.
there was anywhere from 6 to 800 wood ducks sitting in the hole.
Yeah, I mean, I've seen coming where Hayden and I went to college at. I know back when we were in college, Delta Waterfowl had made a video saying that was where the plurality of the pintail wintered in the upper to lower Laguna Madre, and that same place where 85% or something, a majority of the redheads winter. I've seen, I wouldn't even bother saying it on this podcast because it's unbelievable the amount of cloud of pintail that I've seen, or just rafts sitting on the water of ducks. But I've never seen the amount of wood ducks ever, even anywhere close to that you just mentioned. That seems
It's a
crazy.
little far fetched. A lot of people tell me I'm lying, but then when they do sit in there, then they're like, "Wait a minute, you're not lying." I was like, "No, I'm not." I was like, they love this hole, and it's been an old established place. The guys are taking care of it, and even though one blind might be right here and 75 yards to your left is a willow stand that the ducks like to sit in, and come in, we have a select few wood ducks. The first flights that come in, they skip right by all the decoys, and we know who they are because it's usually 4 or 5, the same 4 or 5. They go right by all the blinds and they sit 75 yards in the what we call the safety zone. And we know those ducks have been around forever because they hit that hole right away. We
Yeah.
walk right by them on our way out to the clubhouse. they just look at us like they're pet ducks. Like, hey, how you doing?
Yeah, they've been imprinting there for a long time.
A
So we
long
had we
time.
had we had Ben Pierce on last week, and he's a aviologist. I guess he has his own aviary up there in Idaho. He's been breeding waterfowl for I don't know how long, but what was he mentioning in relation to that? Oh, on the same notes as the Drakes and Hens thing and the importance. So I was always under the impression that it was more about the per species and the repairing. Like if a male gets killed or one male, basically it's like the male can breed several females, right? So, but he brought something to our attention that I didn't even think about, but he maybe this has been research, there's been research on this, he didn't cite any of it, but he had this strong belief that the females were the ones that had the homing instincts. He's like, it's not. And so, I'd heard that about canvasbacks in certain areas because I know they have that really strong homing instinct. I've heard that relative to other duck species, they have the strongest. I'm not sure if that's true or not, but so I'd heard that about canvasbacks, but he was saying that about just any duck in general, why to, like the ducks that you're talking about, that they're going to the safe zone. Like he was saying that, yeah, try to shoot the drakes if you can, because the females are the ones that are going to bring the rest of the ducks back every year continually.
Yeah, and wood ducks, I would say, is completely different from all the other ducks out there because some of the wood ducks, yes, they do migrate all the way up north. I mean, I've got one on my wall, and I'm looking at this all the way from Nova Scotia that I shot in North Carolina. I got another one that was from Connecticut that flew down and I shot. But then there's a lot that are just right there. They're homebodies. They don't migrate. They stay right around there. And these hens, especially with wood ducks, right? They go into that nesting box and that drake sits there and protects her and alerts her if there's a predator so she can come on out and fly out. And I see that a lot when I go check my boxes. The drake will be either on the box or he'll be on a tree nearby. And as I approach that box, I can hear him. She pops her head out and she's gone. If the drake's not there and I knock on the box, she'll be dead silent. She won't poke her head out because I about had a heart attack last year. I open the box and there's a hen that's just absolutely gorgeous, looks really old, very, very dark, almost starting to get the colors of a drake. You know how some hens, when they get that age, it's almost like they go through menopause.
Mm.
But there she was, just looking at me with a whole like 18 eggs.
Wow.
Wow.
Um, and I had another wood duck box right down from that one. These hens, they were laying at the beginning of January. And so that's when I knew that, okay, first of all, they had to already know this area. And then on top of that, usually that wood duck will start laying early if they've laid there before and they feel very comfortable there. And that might be end of January, maybe into February. But the fact that I had wood ducks laying in January while the season's still going lets me know that those wood ducks have been around for a while. And those hens, whether it's mama, daughter, or granddaughter, or whatever, they're coming to those boxes. We're keeping them safe, giving them a safe zone, trying to avoid shooting them, and just keeping the repopulation going and going and going. Um,
So, so you said something there that interests me. So I know for sure that we have some wood ducks near, like my parents have a creek by their house, and will see wood ducks throughout the summer. We also have black-bellied whistling ducks, which I'm sure the migration patterns are different. So I was under the assumption that, because I won't always see wood ducks when I'm driving down the road, but I always see whistling ducks just due to the places they hang out on the golf courses. I don't see that as much with the wood ducks. So, but the whistling ducks will disappear in the wintertime. And I kind of assumed, which some of this could be bias of just not going, to back to the creek, let's say, and when I'm during hunting season, because I'm so focused on that. I just kind of assumed that they were residents, the wood ducks are residents, but they would just migrate further south. Would you, or do
I
you?
agree with that.
Okay.
I agree. I'm not saying that some of the wood ducks that we have don't migrate. I'm just saying that there are a select few that I feel like I should call them by a name, even though people are like, well, you don't know if it's that duck. Well, I've got a sense based on how they act, how I've seen them year over year, coming to that one spot. So it's almost like they never leave. But then some of the new youngins that,
There you are.
sorry, I accidentally touched one button and everything went haywire.
No
But
worries.
no, I definitely believe like the wood ducks that are in North Carolina. I know they probably migrate south, right? I am a huge conspiracy theorist,
Hmm.
but everybody talks about how all the ducks came from Canada and they fly down south, and how we're starting to see less and less. I believe that there was a larger population in the United States, of all ducks, and what we're seeing is all the ducks that we used to have in the States, because of the population of humans growing, moving them out, we're not seeing the reproduction in the United States like we used to. So I think that's impacting the numbers. If if you take a city that has all these parks and little wildlife areas that don't really hold any ducks, but we were to go in there and make them better, I mean, I think that would help increase the population. And let's say everybody in North Carolina increases the wood duck population. Well, that's great for Florida. That's great for Georgia and South Carolina, right? Just like if I'm shooting them from Connecticut, as long as they're populating them in Connecticut, that's great for North Carolina because we're receiving those ducks. Where in Canada, the northern states might be seeing all the ducks now because all the northern states that used to host ducks, um, they're all gone because there's, especially on the Atlantic coast with all the big cities, there's really no areas for them to repopulate. So maybe those Canadian species that are coming down, they're short stopping us because that's where they've always really came to. There might be a select few that go all the way to Florida, but some of them might have just been in genetics like, hey, we stop at Virginia. This is us. We live way at the top by the Arctic. We stop in Virginia
Yeah,
versus us thinking that they fly all the way to Florida.
no
It could
doubt.
it could be the ones that were breeding in New York and Maine. They fly down to like North Carolina, South Carolina, Georgia, or vice versa. But it's a theory. I obviously don't have, but
Something's definitely changed since when I was started duck hunting, when I was a kid. It definitely seems like there was a lot more ducks, but I've thought about that too and worried about it. And, it just like this year we had a really good duck season. I mean, it's one of I've killed more ducks in a season, but this was the best year for just having ducks around, than I ever had. But guys, I hate to jump off of here, but today is my wife's birthday. And I promised,
Aaron,
I promised I'd take her to dinner, and we had a little party at the house the other day. Clayton and Clayton's girlfriend bought her a Kendra Scott gift card, some jewelry thing. Thank you for that, Clayton. But now I have to take her to Kendra Scott because apparently if you go to Kendra Scott on your birthday month, you get like a deal. So we have to go there today so she can get that discount. So
uh,
off
well,
to downtown Austin I go.
all right. Well, I definitely don't want you to lose kitchen passes.
No.
Yeah, this was a lot of fun, John. I appreciate you talking with us.
Yeah, thank you.
I'm gonna give your introduction. I'll record your introduction once we get off. We didn't start with that.
All right.
Yep. Yeah, that's all I got.
All right. Well, I know we briefly talked on the phone, but maybe we can have a conversation on the phone again. But I believe there is a way to train ducks,
Yeah.
to get them to come in from night to day. And it seems like the minute duck season goes out, ducks come from
Oh,
everywhere. So
no
you,
doubt. Yeah.
so they are super smart, and I think we think they're dumb, and they're just taking us for granted.
We we seriously need to plan a teal hunt in Texas for you to come down and we can do another podcast in person, when you're with us. And I'm sure between now and then we come up with a lot more material to talk about, do it in a camp setting. Be a lot of fun.
All right. Well, if I'll talk to the owners of my property, and hopefully I can get y'all up here to North Carolina if it's good. And then if Clayton, if you want to go out and shoot some sea ducks, I got a really good buddy that has some of them real nice core sound layout boats, and we can
Oh,
stick
man.
you out there with the great whites and
Yeah.
let, let you try to shoot some sea ducks.
Yeah. Statistic, you know, I don't know how many lives I have left, but I know I've came far closer to suffering deaths that I'm statistically more likely to die from than a shark bite. So I'll go out there and swim. I'm not going to swim with a I'm not going to swim out there while I'm bleeding, but
Well,
I'm
I'm gonna
not.
send you out with the luckiest person I know. Well, actually, my two gunners, my left and right hand guys, um, they are the luckiest people I know. And if something's bad's gonna like break, it's gonna happen to me. But then I have those two, so you should be in good hands with them.
Yeah, you better not go with Clayton then.
I got it.
It sounds like we don't need to partner up.
Yeah. I can usually fix it though if something breaks, but
He can.
All right.
all
Well,
right,
I'll let
John.
you go.
Enjoyed it, John.
Thank
Appreciate it.
y'all. I
Thank you.
appreciate y'all.
See
All
you.
right, but we'll be talking to you.
All right,
All right.
later, guys.
Bye.
Bye.